Welcome to Bobby's Cryptid Corner. I'm Bree.
I'm Jamie.
And I'm Bobby of the Cryptid Corner.
All right, you guys, we are not talking about cryptids tonight, which is a little bit interesting.
Oh,
I know, but recently on all of our social medias, we welcomed Bobby to our little Tadiwaba universe, and we kind of want to talk about what that means and talk about his story, where he came from, how he started podcasting, how he got into the subject of cryptids and UFOs, and what brought him ultimately to being on Bobby's Cryptid Corner and, a part of our family at this point.
I'll try my damnedest not to repeat myself, things that I've said on other episodes. There's no guarantees here, but yes.
I always repeat myself. That's so fun.
Okay, cool. Well, that's fine. Now, how do you pronounce the acronym there, Jamie?
Tadiwaba.
Tadiwaba. I'm gonna have to say that 10 times every
Tadiwaba is what we
John D'Souza gave us that.
Yes, he did. He's the one. He's like Tadiwaba. That's what you guys should call
John
it.
D'Souza.
Yes, he did.
When
we interviewed him. Mm-hmm.
He seems so nice.
Yeah, he's a sweetheart.
He's a very
he
nice
went a
man.
little Q, which I'm not into, but
that happens sometimes with people. But I mean, so did Mike Barra, and we love Mike Barra.
Yeah, Mike's my exception.
My exception to the rule. All right, so back to what we're talking about. So we're still going to be doing Bobby's Cryptid Corner as always, but what we mean by bringing Bobby on is we want Bobby to be more involved because we want to be able to start pumping out more content to you guys. Sometimes all of our schedules don't align, and we want to be able to have more interactions and more opportunities to have shows and talk to people and deep dive into these kind of subjects. And bringing Bobby on is just a way for us to expand on doing that. And Bobby will be around still here, but just kind of in and out of our other episodes, whether it's our normal episodes, our interviews, or, Factor Sci-Fi, the abduction hotline. It can completely change depending on the week.
And Bobby's like such a great voice. Everybody loves to hear from you, Bobby.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
You're such a cutie with reason.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another thing that we do love is what we're trying to do is
a cutie with reason.
Yes, but what we're trying to do here is we keep talking about in these episodes how the aliens and the cryptid and the paranormals all really collide with each other, and they're all starting to become the same thing to us. So we want to bring on more perspectives than just this alien side that me and Bree have been talking about for the past 4 years. So Bobby starts to bring in a little bit of this cryptid side and these other sides. So we're starting to expand what it is we're talking about just outside of the alien realm.
And consider me not the curious skeptic, but the inquisitive agnostic of this kind of stuff. Again, try not to repeat myself too much, but if you don't know already, I am not an experiencer of any kind of high strangeness. I'm just highly interested in the subject, and I'm completely open-minded to talk about it. I'm not here to debunk things. I may push the envelope a little bit into the realm of skepticism, but I am not here to be disrespectful, or I just want to ask questions to this whole community, not just you guys, because I am sincerely interested in it all. And maybe you guys can all help me understand and elevate my consciousness into an accepting cosmic realm of acceptance.
Well, speaking of how curious you are about the subject, what got you started into going down this path of being interested in UFOs or cryptids or anything like that?
Mostly fear, childhood fear and trauma.
Ooh.
More than anything. General interest. I'm actually just really interested in like anything fringe. It could be, I'm into everything from UFOs and aliens to Bigfoot to ancient civilization, to finding like the weirdo section of the bookstore. Like that's my jam. I like weird music. I like weird movies, just weird shit. I just want things that are interesting. I'm not a fan of the status quo, if that makes sense.
He's a weirdo.
And I do not trust mainstream narratives.
Exactly.
Yeah, I just have come to a point, I think at a very early age, that I'm not one to take things at face value, and that includes fringe topics, but it definitely includes things, whether it be through public school or the corporate media or whatever it is. I'm always like, trying to find, where's the agenda here? What's the motivation here? We're going to follow the money. We're going to follow the, what I'm trying to say? Like, I don't think anything at face value.
100%.
So that's
Yeah.
put me down quite a few rabbit holes.
You are
I'm
a
big Bill Hicks
deep-rooted
fan.
conspiracy theorist, like at its roots.
At
you
its
are a
core.
No,
but
I
you
am
are
a
though. Yeah.
conspiracy-
not
I'm
like the
conspiracy
word
curious.
I hate.
Yeah, like, I was like, they're so
conspiracy curious.
curious.
That's
I like that.
sexy
That's so much
name.
better. I was like, because there's a lot of stigma around conspiracy theorists. Like, a lot of people don't like to be called that, but I think that there's this weird stigma behind this name, because at the core of what being a conspiracy theorist is questioning the status quo and our government and the
Yes.
narrative that we're told. But being called a conspiracy theorist is such a negative thing. It means you're crazy and you're psycho. But I think to me, the term is so much more endearing because it means you're just inquisitive of what you're being spoon-fed.
Which, by the way, was a term invented by the CIA, I believe in the 1960s, to discredit anyone that was questioning the narrative or trying to figure out the motives of nefarious forces in the world.
Exactly.
So take that for what it's worth. I'm not one to be strawmanned. I'm just like, I'm a big like free speech guy. I want to hear everything. I want to hear what everyone has to say. I want to hear different perspectives that are outside of the shit that I've already read. I always tell people, I do my other show, Not For Everyone podcast, which is about like weird cult movies. Like I always say, like, I've seen the Casablancas and I've seen the Citizen Kanes and the Godfathers of the world. I've seen all those like classic, Hollywood movies, and they're great for various reasons. But at the end of the day, it's like, okay, what else you got? Like, what else is going on? Show me something else that's interesting. And it doesn't have to necessarily be like conventionally, highbrow or sophisticated. You can get, a cathartic response or some sort of like, you can feeling out of other things beyond what is allowable or what is conventional. Right. So that's my whole thing, is like, I just want interesting shit because everything else bores me. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely, it does. You're a very curious person in general. So what
Scorpio energy?
What made you decide to start podcasting then? So your podcast, Not For Everyone podcast, is about horror cult films. You do it with your best friend. What made you jump into the field to decide to like passionately talk about something on the radio? You know what I mean?
First of all, my mom's my best friend and she's not on the podcast. So
What's your mom's name?
don't worry about it.
You said
you
your
wanna
mom.
say hi to her.
Her name is Jeanette.
Hi, Jeanette.
Is she
Okay.
is she French?
No, I was just being silly.
Then what's her
no,
real
it's
name?
Jeanette.
Oh,
That's it.
okay. All right.
So yeah, I don't know. My friend Adam and I met at work at one job, like back in like 2010. And we had a lot in common. We were like kind of buddies at work. And then he left that job and then convinced me to come over to his new job. We always had these like breaks in it. We went out on like smoke breaks or whatever in the parking lot.
Yeah.
And he and I would like just start talking smack to each other, like friendly guy, like shit talk, And eventually we started to kind of like gather a crowd. It was like a rap battle, but like just not even like musical or rhyming or flowing. It was just us like basically roasting,
just bouncing off each other. Yeah.
Just roasting each other for a good like 50 minutes, and then people were like, you guys should just do a podcast at this point. And we've already bonded over like similar interests, whether it be like cult horror movies or weird fringe stuff, or I don't know, there's just a chemistry there on multiple levels. So I was just like, okay, I guess we'll start doing this. And that was like back in maybe like spring 2017.
Ooh.
And I can't go back and even listen to those early episodes because it's like cringe. Not to say that the new ones aren't, but you know what I mean. It's just like when you start doing anything, it's like it's like, ugh, like if you like,
you got to get your
you never want to go play the first song you ever wrote or something like that. So but that's one thing I want to throw out to everyone. Like if you guys are thinking about doing anything, whether it be content creating or writing or YouTube videos, podcasting, like don't be, or stand-up comedy or whatever, like don't be afraid to, like, you have to just go out and do it and suck balls at it for like a long time
before it's good.
And I'm not even like trying to say that my shit's great. I'm just saying it's way better than it was. So it's like like anyone that is dabbling in the ideas of trying to put yourself out there, just start doing it. And if you get gratification from it, keep doing it. Eventually you have a home studio that you spent lots of money on, and hopefully your Patreon subscribers will help you pay that back.
No, it's so funny too that you say that, because if anyone knows, our listeners know our story. We've said this 100 times on our podcast and others. That's almost the exact same story of how we started a podcast. We started yelling at each other, and then people formed around us and they said, start a podcast. And here we all are talking to each other.
Yeah. Controversy attracts audiences, because like I think there's nothing wrong with it, but like I go and listen to like other, I guess, similar podcasts of my other podcasts within the same genre, which would be like horror movie, cult movie type stuff. And I'm like, it's fine and it's well researched, and like they seem like nice, friendly people, but like I don't like, we try not to do like, hey, let's do an episode on, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Like that's been done 100 times, right?
Yeah.
And that kind of segues me into a rant that I wanted to go on in regards to the context of what's the acronym? How do you pronounce it?
Tadiwaba
In the growing snowball that is Tadiwaba into the cosmos. Basically, there's nothing wrong with telling the story of Betty and Barney Hill, or listening to yet another interview with Travis Walton, or analyzing the shit ad nauseum out of the Patterson Gimlin film, or relaying the supposed occurrences at the Amityville house. That's fine. That's all fine. It's fun. The market's just really flooded right now with content. And how many times can we have the same conversation and listen to the same interview, right? I think we're at kind of a precipice, or like a fork in the road now when it comes to like internet content creators, because if you're not bringing something new to the table, and I'm not saying like the three of us are not going to have our like less insightful episodes, like we still want to cover the relatively conventional stuff. But what I want to do with you guys is try to like push the needle somewhere else, and just attempt to provide some sort of new perspective, or connect the dots in a way that will push it. I like, because if you're just rehashing in your own fun, unique way, like books or documents you've read on whatever topic, like that's fine. But like if you've ever, I don't know if you guys have ever written anything. I used to write for a website called Fear Forever. And when you're like, hey, just give me 500 to 600 words, when you're stretching to hit 500 words, like you're basically just fluffing it up at some point. Like you have to try to create something that's like
pretty much out of nothing,
like fills the space.
That like fills the space, but you don't want to just fill the space for the sake of filling the space. You want it to be insightful if you can help it, right?
Yep.
If you're not, you're just being a content slave. You might as well go work at an SEO, content farm to help people drive traffic to their site or something.
Exactly.
And I don't want to do that, and I don't want to just sit around and just have the same conversations about the same occurrences. In all these occurrences that I've just mentioned there, like no doubt that they're all like important milestones in this whole like Fortean world of
we're not taking away from it. It's just like, what do we do with these information next? Like how do we take what we've learned from these stories and these people talking about these experiences, and how do we turn that into what we do next when it comes to contact or going forward with what it means to explain this phenomenon, or what it means to look into or to research or to explore it.
Well, I think we have the secret sauce. I say it now, I'll say it again. I think know. Every time we look at something, it's so different.
100%.
I think it just depends on like who you're having the conversation with. And I think that's why we also wanted to bring Bobby on here, is because he has such a good perspective. And he's on the same like mind-blowing wave that we have. We're not looking at things surface level or even like a lower, deeper. It's deeper than that. And it's like, our subconsciouses seem to work the same way, where we think of like these weird motifs and then we dive into that and then we expand on that, where I don't think a lot of people have the capacity to necessarily think of a situation that deep.
Well, and that's 100% true, because one of the things I want to say too is why we want to bring Bobby on in that same kind of sentences. Bobby is on our level when it comes to the way that we think about things, but he is just as smart as we are. Like, we are constantly trying to think of things outside of the box, and Bobby does that effortlessly without us having to try. Like, I find just the three of us in general, when we even have conversations with each other outside of this podcast, we're having out of the box conversations. Like, part of what Bobby's talking about when he's referencing the rant he wants to go on, he sent me like a voice memo this morning of, hold on, I'm just in my car and I have to get it out and I need to talk about it. But we feel that we're in a safe space to have those kind of conversations, which allow us to start looking at things and digging into these kind of stories a lot deeper, I think.
I wasn't in that group,
we'll start. Yeah, you should have sent it. Yeah, you should have sent it to the group, Bobby.
I'm sorry. I was being Scorpio self-conscious about it, I guess. But like all those, foundational archetypical stories that kind of built this community or this field of study or whatever are super important. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying like I'm tired of hearing about that stuff, because
that's okay though. That's totally okay.
Exactly.
Sometimes I am. It's just your take is different.
No, and here's the thing, because we've said this before in the podcast, and I specifically went and we asked Nick Pope about it when we were at Contact of the Desert. I said, why is it that every few years people tend to bring up the fucking Roswell event or the Rendlesham Forest, when it's like it's been done over a million times, it's been talked about a million times, but it keeps coming up in the news cycle? And he had a very interesting point that he was saying, and he said that yes, to you it is, but there's a lot of people inside of this world who are not going backwards to look at the information that was already said about it, but they're looking forward about the new information that's being said about it. So you have these new generations who are constantly coming into the subject. So I think that, like you said, even in that same sentence, it is okay to continue to talk about these things, but we have to start talking about them in a more evolved and conscious way than just going over the documents and repeating the same story about what happened over and over again.
Yeah, and that's actually perfect for what I was about to get at here, is like those stories are legitimately compelling, but at the same time, and they are super important to introduce new people or younger people that are recently interested in this stuff. And it's a very solid, important foundation. Like if I'm going to go study, Stevie Ray Vaughan, I want to go back and listen to fucking Robert Johnson and, Muddy Waters and shit. You know what I mean? Like you still need to. Right. Yeah. No, we'll talk about that another time. But anyway, my point is like, you got to like respect your roots and everything. But at the same time, when you think about those iconic stories and this kind of stuff, there's a reason that they got limelight, whether it be organically or inorganically, is that there was only so much information available through a limited amount of mediums of their time, right? For whatever reason, Betty and Barney Hill got some traction. For whatever reason, people saw the Patterson-Gimlin film and it went nuts, and it kind of like broke the dam, as I like to say, and pushed this stuff into like the cultural consciousness, like, or whatever.
Push the dam.
But like we can't dead end at just talking about that stuff. So the good news is we have new mediums and we have less gatekeepers, right? And I think that people that are into this stuff, like veterans like us, are kind of starving for something more. And there are experiences out there that you've never heard. There's people with stories to tell that are just as profound as Betty and Barney Hill or Travis Walton or Whitley Strieber or whoever. And if we don't push these topics beyond what we've previously in other generations been deemed allowable to talk about in the last 50 years, that void will eventually be filled by something trying to ultimately control where it's allowed to go to next, right? And right, and that's what I want to try to avoid, is like I don't want the approved government narrative or whatever,
totally.
That's why I was on previous episodes, I've been so skeptical of the whole like To the Stars Academy stuff. Is like, this just reeks like people are starting to discover these things and kind of give them the benefit of the doubt or be a little more curious or open-minded about it. And this reeks as if there's institutions trying to get a hold of that and tell them what's okay and what's not okay to investigate.
Well, and I think that's why it's so important that we continue to have shows like this and talk about as many subjects as we do, because it's not about the narrative that the mass media is controlling right now. The mass media has made it so that we are in a current environment where it's a lot more okay to talk about these kind of subjects. So let's exploit the living shit out of that and do it ourselves.
Until they start censoring it.
And that, you know what, and even if they do censor it, we figure out ways to get fucking around that shit.
Hell yeah, girl.
But while we're doing it, we have to, this subject is so big and there's so much more and there's so much controversy. And I think what we all need to understand as a whole in a community is that there's space for everyone talking about this. And the more and more people are talking about it, the better, because at the end of the day, it's not going to be your government. Fucking Joe Biden isn't going to come out and say, hey guys, aliens are fucking real. It's going to be stuff like this where we have an entire stratosphere taking over YouTube, where all of a sudden the only content that's out there is all this stuff talking about aliens and YouTubes and fucking ghosts and whatever the hell it is we're all going to talk about. And that's going to be the movement. We have to change as a whole. We have to, all of us, get together and show that this is a much bigger thing than it is.
And I think it's time to start connecting dots beyond our little tribal preferred interests as well.
Exactly.
Because I am first and foremost Bigfoot for life. That is my thing. Mm-hmm. That does not mean that I'm not interested in alien abduction phenomenon or UFOs or whatever.
And it doesn't mean that all that is separate and not connected.
But again, even with Bigfoots, not just, even with cryptids and not just aliens, like I've watched all the subpar and better documentaries that are available on YouTube and Amazon and Netflix. I'm like, I've seen all this shit. Like, what else you got? And I don't think anyone's going to give us anything else unless we bring it to them, you know?
Exactly.
Like, I don't think anything else is coming down the pike from these, like, granted, like, probably well-researched, good people that are into this. Like, this is the new generation. It's like Pepsi, or the no, fuck Pepsi. But you know what I'm trying
Coke
to say?
For life.
You know what I'm trying to say? Like, this isn't your old man's UFO show. But yeah, we need to connect the dots beyond just our little factions. Like, that's why I want to get involved with interviewing people that are like everything from ghost to astral projection to hollow earth theory to hollow moon theory to reptilians to nuts and bolts people to skinwalkers, like the whole gamut. And just see, Bree mentioned the word earlier, motif. Just see if we can find any motifs to kind of thread this together somehow and see if maybe it is some sort of related phenomenon, whether it be psychic or physical or spiritual or whatever, right?
That's fucking beautiful. So, like, when was the first moment in your life where you even thought about UFOs?
They've always taken a back seat to cryptids for me, but it's always one of those things, like whenever you go to the library and you rent the like 4 books they have in like at the school library on, like, you know, it's always like a book that's like UFOs, ghosts, and Bigfoots, or like they always combine it into one like 30-page, you know, young adult.
The Monster Mash.
Yeah, that kind of stuff.
The Monster Mash.
And then I think I've alluded to it on other episodes, but like I watched the movie Fire in the Sky when I was like, I want to say like in 3rd or 4th grade. I was a kid.
Yeah, that's and that goes back to that's like, way too young. That is way too young.
My old man showed me a lot of shit that I should not have watched as a child, and that's kind of why I'm so fucked up now.
Should we clarify that, because people could jump to conclusions?
Oh
when
no,
you say
like
that?
no, not like snuff films or anything, but like I saw like The Shining at a pretty young age.
Okay, just like movies that weren't appropriate for your age.
Okay,
and like we
I'm
watched.
Glad
like,
you said that.
I
I thought way deeper. I was like, whoa.
Ooh.
No.
Wow.
Yeah, your mind's in the gutter. He's a wonderful man. But like just the kind of like we would watch maybe like an A&E documentary on like demon possession or something. And there would be like a part of the story where like before the person got the child got possessed by demons, they reported that they would hear like scratching on the walls. And then later that night I'd be going to bed completely forgotten that we watched that. And then like I would hear scratching on the walls and be like my dad outside, like, you know, trying to scare me or whatever. So that kind of stuff. And then when I saw
Dad's a G.
Yeah, when I saw Fire in the Sky, obviously the abduction scene, I think, still holds up as one of the scariest scenes in any movie. Maybe that's just my own bias because it had such a profound impact
Brie
on me.
agrees.
I think it's super scary, and I think that movie's still super well done and holds up pretty well. So I started, like, not begrudgingly, but like kind of tiptoeing into that kind of world. And there was a book, I've actually ordered it off eBay since then, called UFO Kids. It was like the Scholastic Book Fair, like just like, you know, like 40, 50 pages of like 4 or 5 different supposedly true accounts of
I know what you
alien
mean.
abduction.
Yeah.
And
how did I miss that at the Scholastic Fair? Like, what
I
the
don't know.
fuck?
So I have one that's kind of like that. It's 666 absolutely true stories that happened to a friend of a friend of a friend, and it's like urban legends and things. It's like something like this. It's like a mashup.
Scholastic
No, but I get what you're saying. It's like a mashup.
This was like very young adult, but it was like very scary stuff. Like, I read the first story and it kind of scared me. I was like, I'm gonna keep going. And then the second story talked about a young kid that was like in their room alone one night and like started hearing a humming, and then I was like, I don't know what it was about that, but I was like, I gotta close this shit. And then of course every like sound that the house made or whatever, I'm like freaking out.
I'm done.
And it got to the point where it was pretty difficult to like sleep for like a good year. Like, I really just scared myself into like a phobia of all this. And I've always said, like, the things that you fear when you're a kid, it kind of morphs into like an interest as you get older too. Things like that, almost like I'm making up for lost time, because I remember like asking like, hey, can I go stay with like grandma and grandpa who live in the city, because I thought for whatever reason like
you were safe there,
aliens can't abduct you in the city or whatever. But things like that, I don't know. And then I put it away for a long time and just got into like skateboarding and punk rock and stuff like that. And then now it all comes back around, and here we are doing the old YouTube show.
Question.
Yes.
Is there a possibility that maybe you experienced something and that's why it scared you so much?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, is there a reason? Yeah, I was thinking the exact same thing when you said it, Brie. The exact same thing.
Are we doing like therapeutic repressed memory exploration?
Well, no,
shit?
it definitely
happens like that though.
Yeah, so something that we see that we've found in our research and talking to a lot of experiencers is that when you have that very visceral fear like that, there's kind of a reason for it.
Truth.
Yeah, like there's a fear, you have no idea why, but it terrifies you. So there maybe you heard it and it started to unlock some sort of memory that maybe subconsciously you don't want yourself to have access to, and hearing it pushed it up and you desperately didn't want to bring that memory up.
It's possible. I mean, I'm not completely closed off to the idea, but at the same time, I was a pretty like weird, imaginative, anxious kid in general.
But we all are. I feel like that's like you're prone to those types of experiences when you are that kid.
And I was just exactly the same thing. When you are a child, the veil is much more see-through and accessible to you when you are younger. And so you are able to have a lot more of those experiences. Sure. And a lot of people don't ever remember those experiences, whether it be because they suppress the memory or aliens, do the little Men in Black thing to you. Who knows? But tons of people don't have those memories. But me and Brie both immediately, it's something that when we talk to experiencers, that specific type of fear that you were talking about is usually indicative of abduction scenarios.
Shit. Well, now I have to do some self-exploration, meditation.
That's a part of being a part of the podcast too. Like,
and then
so many things like that I didn't think about until we started talking about it,
and
I was like, well, that's fucking weird. Actually,
let
me dig into that.
And then you should, in addition to that, Bobby, start thinking about people in your family who have possibly had sightings of UFOs or contact that they necessarily haven't talked about to you yet, because there seems to be a very strong thread within inside of family. And even Brie, for how long, for years, she didn't think her family had any kind of ties. Now her family tells her about when they see UFOs and things like that. Everybody now.
Everyone.
And the more and more you dig, the more and more these layers you start to go back. You sit down with someone like maybe your grandma or your grandpa, and you say, hey, have you ever seen a UFO? And they're like, you know what? In 1969, I never told anyone about this. And no one had ever asked them before to have those kind of conversations.
Yeah, I think about it a lot now because I didn't really put it together at the time. But my grandmother's dead on my dad's side, but she, when I think back now, like, she was really she like did not take anything at face value. She thought everything was all bullshit, but at the same time she was always watching like UFO shit and alien abduction shows
you
and
guys
things
are
like
so
that.
like,
And I'm like,
there's always
damn,
that
like,
weird connection.
Mhm.
I feel like,
right.
yeah,
Like she was a big like Ross Perot person when it was like Bush versus Clinton, like the, you know, the
Totally.
iconoclast type, like fuck all these people. The whole mainstream narrative is bullshit. Everything's,
I love
you know,
that.
that kind of thing. And I'm like, oh, I totally inherited that. Like it's
Yeah.
it's like that thing where you're so skeptical that you're skeptical of the skeptics, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Absolutely.
That's me.
I think that's what kind of
Totally.
like our podcast is, because I think a lot of times some people listen to some of our episodes and they are like, you guys are a little bit skeptical of things. And it's like, I don't necessarily think it's that we're skeptical of things, it's that we're skeptical of the skepticals. And so
I'm
we're
skeptical of everything.
And we're just, well, that's what I mean. Like, we're just
even
my
own experiences.
We're
I'm
just
like,
trying.
Did it?
No, that's
Was
what I mean,
it?
though. We're just trying to figure it out as we go. We are going in with an open mind that we really believe all of this stuff, but sometimes it is a part of life that it is a more skeptical side of you, and necessarily we don't believe in something. That's just a part of, I think, investigating this subject honestly and openly.
It boils down to this: like, do we want to sit around and be experiencers that just, you know, kind of circle jerk and validate each other and blah blah blah, or are
Sounds
we
like
looking
fun?
And I think that there's
that's
a time
okay,
and place for that. There's a time and place for that. But like, as far I am not an experiencer, as far as I know. Maybe I am after this last conversation we had. But my like I, as skeptical as I am, and like not, and I believe that science is incredibly corruptible, and like all this, you know, tangible like status quo mechanisms and systems that we live by. I think that it is important to some degree, but like with anything that's, you know, controlled or run by human beings, it is corruptible. And I think a lot of skepticism comes from that. At the same time, I think science on paper is very important, or Occam's razor or skepticism super important to try. I'm still a fan of that stuff as well. So I'm just a truth junkie is what it boils down to.
100%.
And if that truth is not going to, like, if you follow the evidence to the point, well, I wish this was real, but it seems, I got to be honest with myself, this seems like a bunch of tomfoolery, quackery nonsense. Like, I'm not gonna like hold back with that opinion either.
But that's important, and I think that's what is a big difference between a lot of some of these shows that are out there that are talking about whatever kind of subject it is they tend to be a little bit more biased when it comes to it, because that's where their bread and butter is. It's like, well, of course I'm going to say that this story is real, because that's why people listen to me. They listen to me because they want me to say that this alien story is real.
Right. And that's kind of goes back to what we were talking about on the government disclosure episodes we did, is like, you know, misinformation is intentionally put out there, but it always has a nugget of truth. And we have to learn how to filter through that somehow and try to find the common threads that, you know, do point to something legitimate and throw out everything else.
Okay. So
vaccines are legitimate.
It's so interesting that you say misinformation, because one of the things that's going on in the UFO Twitter world right now, which is like taking it by storm, is they're talking about a lot of disinformation agents out there. And so we went from this beautiful community of like talking about UFOs and documents being dropped and things, to yelling at each other, to now everyone accusing the other one of being a disinformation agent. And it's the funniest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, you see that in the conspiracy world too.
And it's literally, it's imploding itself from the inside. And what people don't know is this is literally what the government wanted all along. Like, this was their whole plan from the beginning
how do we
of it.
fix that? How do we fix that?
That's what we're trying to do here. That's what we're trying to do here. How do we
discern? How do we discern who? I mean, like, honestly, my only advice is based off of like what you were born with, which is like your intuition. I think everyone's born with that innate intuition. And obviously, like, the more open that you are and the more work that you do, you're able to see through that, and like you feel it in your body and your intellect and your heart, and like your whole vessel is like, this is not cool. But there are people out there that don't have that, like they haven't fostered that type of ability within them, and they just like fall for things. So it's like, what do you tell people?
But just to play devil's advocate here, that intuition can be a product of your preconceived notions as well. So like, anytime you bring this stuff up to a normie that's not into it, they don't want to hear it because that challenges their own paradigms, and their own intuition tells them retreat. They get in like fight or flight mode, and here we are, and around we go.
That's
So,
true. But and like for me, I would say that is not intuition, that's the mind. But in a person in that state, like you're talking about, they don't know the difference between like what I'm talking about when it's like your whole body, your heart, and your mind is synchronizing, and
Sure.
that intuition says no.
okay.
To them, it's just the mind. It's
Okay.
the mind is separate from all these other facets
Yeah,
in your body
and
that it
it's-
should be working in sync to tell you no.
and let me put it into a little bit more perspective for you, because I think Brett Cameron put it in a very good way, is when he was talking to experiencers and stuff, or people who receive downloads and things, and he said,
Who?
at Grant Cameron.
Oh.
And he said, he asked these people, like, how do you know that this information is true? Or how do you know that these things happen to you? And it was like, the way they described it is, no, you don't understand. I just know. And that's the kind of feeling that she means. It's just a definite, like, kind of like we joke around a lot about how like I bullshit and like I know a lot of things, but sometimes there are things that I just know. And it's like, I don't know why or how, but I have full and 100% trust that whatever the fuck is coming out of my mouth is true. And sometimes it fucking is, but there's this thought behind this just knowing, and it's a different than anything you've ever experienced before, and you just to your core know.
But it's
And-
really murky though, if you think about that.
No, it is 100%.
Because there's like most psychotic people, not psychotic, I don't even know a better word for that, but like there are people that their mind creates the same circumstance
Oh,
and they
100%.
feel like they just know.
100%.
And then if you want to go deeper than that, did they switch to another timeline where then that's the truth?
And that's exactly the whole thing though, because
their
we keep
mind is like, yes. So there has to be a separation between the mind knowing, because the mind, I think, will ultimately take value. The mind will ultimately overpower all of that, but it has to be mind, body, and heart that's all synchronized. That says yes. The people that are too far mind, that mind can be so strong where they can literally switch a timeline. In my opinion, I think they can ultimately switch a timeline in which that is correct, or maybe it's not correct in that time and place.
Well,
but
maybe
they so strongly believe it that then they're literally switching into another timeline where that is correct.
And maybe not a different timeline, but something we talk about constantly on this show is this idea that your mind can create your own reality. So you just,
but that's the thing.
No, that's what I'm saying.
It's switch.
Exactly. It's not just even going into a new timeline, but you believe it so much to be true that you are changing your own reality with your mind. Like it is in your reality true.
Right. And I think that dovetails into stuff about the multiverse too. Because I think that the multiverse, I mean, I think that the consensus of the population can create reality because so many people believe it. But I think if someone believes something, so like it can still be a subjective offspring of like, you know, offshoot of the multiverse. So like
egregore. Am I saying
like in
that
another
right?
But the ultiverse is infinite. So it's not necessarily that you're creating the reality. It's that ultimately
you're tapping into
everything is possible.
Right.
So
it's not that it's possible.
Like Bobby
it's
said, you're
happening.
tapping into that version in which it's correct.
Right.
So it's not that we're creating it, but it's that our mind has already created it because it was in the impossibility field, which therefore creates the potentiality of it being realistic.
Well,
so then we're just jumping to that. And then who knows if we're all liars, because potentially out there we're all fucking telling the truth. It's such a mind fuck. If you know,
and I think
such
that
a mind
you
fuck.
That's where a lot of the contention that you see in the tribalism you see on things like Twitter. And I am not here to, I'm a grown-ass man with job. I do not have time to get involved in UFO Twitter
with
drama, FYI.
Same.
So I just feel like that, like the way that the internet has fractured everyone's reality is creating a lot of different perspectives that are conflicting with one another. And you can go down the whole route of like, who's to say one person's right, who's to say one person's wrong. So all that said, the good news is, think about it like this. Okay, we don't have to spend as much time as individuals reading every single John Keel book, or, you know, listening to every, I don't, or like, you know, investigating, you know, Whitley Strieber, and then the book that debunks him, and like all that shit. Like we don't have to do that anymore, because we have this, like, we have this network, we have this, like, you can go off and read something, report back to us. I can go off and investigate something else, report back, and so like our timeline, like our existence on the planet does not require us to sit around spending that time like reading word for word these documents. This technology brings us together to hash out ideas, and in a sense we can take away the whole library of esoteric thought or Fortean themes or high strangeness that in previous generations you weren't able to do, because they didn't have podcasting, they didn't have Zoom calls where you can jump on and talk about it. So that's what I want to kind of get at with this whole thing that we have going on, is take advantage of that.
Are we perpetuating that? Are we perpetuating more timelines, more probabilities?
That's a different question altogether.
But that's where my mind is thinking, is that if we are doing what you're saying, are we cutting out those things and being like, don't think too hard and go down those types of roads? Listen to us. Or it's that, like, listen to us, and then we're just creating more.
Like, I understand the whole subjective reality thing completely.
I just love that. Like, I love the thought of that, because I think there's so much truth in it.
I think there's something to it, but at the same time, if I go like this, I just clap my hands. You guys, everyone that's watching this, like, that just happened.
But
right?
But like, scientifically, your clap, we're behind sound wise, and especially through the internet. That clap happened later for us. It's not the same.
No, because then if we're going to be talking about time, then you're only talking about our Earth time. Because if we're going to be talking about time in general, it all happens at the exact same time. So his clapping has already happened and is happening currently right now, and has already happened.
Which means in other timelines, it hasn't happened yet.
Or in other timelines, he didn't clap.
And in this timeline, he clapped when we first started.
That's the circle of it all.
In this timeline, I clapped.
Well,
you guys saw it.
I don't know, Bobby. Did you? I didn't hear it.
My point is, there are things
but that's the layers on the layers of what you're saying, though. Like, it's so heavy. It doesn't sound heavy, but realistically, the realistic part is so stupid. Like, we always say realistically, but realistically, it's so deeper than anyone would realistically think.
Realistically.
I think that we're, like, a little too deep for the deepers.
Never. That's what I love about having the conversations with the three of us, though, is that I think sometimes I have conversations with people in my everyday life about this stuff, and it doesn't go deep, and I feel kind of like,
and they're confused. They're like,
yeah, and I'm like, oh, God damn it, you don't understand what I'm saying. Or when I start to talk about something, they're like, what?
You see the like poppets like buffering.
Exactly. So it's like, we can talk about these things, like these different timelines, and all three of us know exactly what the hell we're talking about. And I think that's we important that we continue to do this, because then the people who watch us are going to understand what the hell we're talking about. And then they can go on and perpetuate this conversation inside of their lives and feel more open to talking about these kind of fringe ideas and things and thinking outside of the box.
And catch up. I was so stoned the other day when Jamie was here, actually. I didn't want to wake her up. I didn't want to wake my husband up. So sort of like voice recording, because I was like, my mind was like so intense. So I was like, I have to start voice recording this. So her just like talking out loud. And basically what I was saying was that we all do and say things, and it's in our own like time trajectory, but we have different thoughts and opinions. But maybe the point of that is so that we cross reference, and eventually that cross reference gets so deep that then we start to question each other, and we start to question our timelines. And then we start to question whether timelines even exist.
Okay.
And then within that thought process.
Okay, so
I don't like the word line in timeline.
Okay, so what it sounds like you're saying to me, like what I initially get off of that is what I immediately think of is breaking out of like the matrix. So by internalizing this and looking at and going deeper and deeper inwards, in reality, what you're doing is disconnecting yourself from this matrix that we're living in. And the deeper and deeper you go, the farther and farther you're disconnecting yourself from the matrix.
And that was my thought. And there's been so many times where I've gotten like so stoned, and it's like usually a combination of being like really high and really drunk at the same time. Where then I do things and I'm like, if I do something different, I'm breaking out of what I'm supposed to do.
Well,
and then I think like it's another level. Like
there's
a video game level.
There's a type of euphoria involved with when you're inside of that space and you realize the separation between, I mean, what we're calling the matrix. I'm sure there's different people use different words for it. But when you go that deep and you see the disconnection of that and how you can disconnect yourself from it, there is a sort of euphoria that happens inside of that, sort of like a dopamine release that does feel like you're kind of almost leveling up.
It's like a thought. Like my thought was just, if we all keep doing this, and if we all keep
and enough people keep
deeper, deeper beyond what we're just doing, but thinking, what am I doing? How am I doing? How is my experience different than the person next to me? Like, what is maybe we have an argument. How is our argument different? Where are they coming from? Where am I coming from? It's like the layers of that. And it's like breaking past that. Then you realize that it's because you're in different perspectives, and your different perspectives are different timelines, but yet you're on the same timeline. So then realizing that, you don't see it as one straight timeline, which is one straight truth. There's different truths in your timeline, meaning that we're not all on the same trajectory. We all have these different points of views. We're all experiencing something different. Maybe we all have to see that. And then what?
And if you think I like to think of it in that sense as it's a constantly expanding, almost like a spider web or a tree that's constantly growing with new branches. And that might just be what the universe is.
Exactly.
Right?
But what is the meaning behind that? The meaning behind that is to realize that's what you're doing. So then when you realize like what you're doing is all based off of your like preconceived notions of how things should say and be and look like, those are all different channels running.
Right. And that gets into the whole law of attraction / like the secret shit. Where
I think it ultimately dives into the matrix factor. What Jamie was saying, it's the matrix factor. It's beyond just like how you feel and all that shit. It's everything going at once and then realizing that you're a part of it. So then this is the point. The point is to realize.
In the matrix itself, like on a metaphysical level, is like what, like a simulation, right? Or like but in the tangible world, you can also view the matrix as like it's just people that have not thought about these things to the level that we have, or have not dabbled in it whatsoever.
So much deeper.
And
I think
simply
I can't even.
You're all your beliefs and all the things you subscribe to is controlled by something else and not yourself.
Yeah. No.
So that
I would disagree. I feel like it's the fabric in which existence is created. Pure and simple.
Sure. Yes.
So it's a grid. I think it's a grid. I think there's layers, and I think that we've added a lot to it. And I think that we weave in and out of it, but regardless, it is the fabric, the design.
Sure.
In which creation was made. And so like we're implanted into that. And so especially, this is so deep, because you start to think about like your reincarnations and your roles and where you're planted. And so then you're going through that type of weaving, that line, that living. So obviously your thoughts would be aligned with that thought of like who you are and where you are and how you should feel. And because you're so deep in who you are in that person that you've been given in that reincarnation. So you go on that line. But then if you think super deep about it, you pop out of that. You're separate from who you were and who you should be in that line. And you think outside of it and you look around and you're like, oh my God, like this is a design. And this design in this time and space is just one of the strings that's a part of my whole dress in existence.
I'm not sure if it helps or hurts to be like high as a kite when listening to this.
That's like too much. I don't know.
And so you might have to be slightly high, but I understand what you're saying. Like I get what you're saying, but I think what Bobby was trying to relate the Matrix as is more just like on a relatable level of what we would talk about here on Earth. And like I would talk about the Matrix more as being like on a more like earthly level is like the Matrix is this idea of you have to be married at a certain age and have a good job and be doing this and that in life.
That's societal.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah,
that's not Matrix.
We're talking about it in two different contexts.
Matrix is deeper.
But we're just talking
Matrix is
yes
deeper.
I know, but we were trying to compare it to like a more surface level of what you were talking about.
When you use
it's
the phrase,
not surface. That's a problem though. It's
right.
not a surface issue. It's not a surface word. I don't think you can say Matrix and talk to like Joe Schmo and they'll understand. They won't.
Contextually, when you talk about breaking the Matrix or taking the red pill or whatever it is, like culturally, like societally, like you said, and I'm not talking about necessarily like the metaphysics of it all, which I agree with what you're saying.
That's not the Matrix.
In that context, I'm just talking about when we use that phrase, it means that you are breaking out of
a mold, almost
controlled narratives or controlled expectations or perceptions that you are deemed, only allowed to subscribe to this, only allowed to go and do this.
Disagree.
What are we debating?
I think that's a word. I mean, just like the word itself, I think is thrown around now. It's more just like if you're a conspiracy theorist, seems to be that term.
But if we're talking about the Matrix, like let's just say the movie, but the movie is what we're talking about. The movie is that idea that the Matrix
is deeper. The movie is not just like what society tells you. That'd be like people thinking like, oh, the president isn't this and that, and like don't take the vaccine and the like big pharma, like all of that shit.
But
we could have
that same kind of argument when it comes to the idea of the word God. We have to stop putting so much weight and meaning into what words are.
I'm just talking about it in two different contexts. Like there's different connotations for words. Like I understand the metaphysical approach that you're arguing for, Bree, but I was just explaining like there's different ways to use that word. Like I would say that people that are listening to this show are at least curious about quote unquote, breaking out of the Matrix, breaking out of the approved, the approved information that
the approved narrative that's out
allowed to subscribe to.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, metaphysically, I understand what you're saying as well.
100%.
Yeah, there should probably be a different word.
Okay.
There should be. 100%. All right, guys, we've been recording for quite some time. We're going to have to wrap up today's episodes, my loves. Good night. We love you, and we'll see you guys all next week with another cryptid. With a cryptid.
Should we?
Any final thoughts before we go?
No, I think we're about to go on a really fun adventure, and like I said earlier, I want to consolidate. So I just want to shout out to anyone that's relatively, maybe UFOs aren't your first choice. We want to talk to you about other adjacent topics because we're trying to connect the dots here. That's what I want to end.
Fuck yeah. Good point. Trying to connect the dots.
All right, guys, we love you and we'll see you all next week. Bye.